Think about what you know of the Cold War. You know about tanks, submarines, and fighter jets. You know about the space race, the satellites, and the ICBMs. You know about the technologies that changed history. But what if we told you that deep within the Soviet Union, under absolute secrecy, military leaders and engineers were working on a project that should not have existed? A project whose blueprints looked less like they were stolen from the West, and more like they were taken from another planet, in the 1980s. While Reagan labeled the USSR the evil empire, and Western intelligence desperately tried to decipher how the Soviets planned to mobilize their forces across Europe, a radical concept was born in closed design bureaus. A concept meant to solve all of the USSR's logistical nightmares, become the most efficient transport vehicle on Earth, and, in the event of war, carry a deadly payload. This was the EKIP, ostensibly. The acronym stood for Ecology and Progress, EKIP. This was a cover, as thin and brilliant as the craft itself. Look at its shape. It is not an airplane. It is not a helicopter. It is not a hovercraft. It is a seamless, smooth, flying disc. When Western analysts first saw fragments of schematics in fuzzy photographs, their initial reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief. This could not be a Soviet development. It was too radical, too UFO-like, but the EKIP was real. It was born of desperation, genius, and the Soviet dream of total superiority. And its stories about how Cold War technology came dangerously close to creating its own alien myth. The story of the EKIP is inextricably linked to its creator, the engineer Lev Shchukin. Shchukin was more than just an aircraft designer. He was a systems thinker, obsessed with efficiency. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union faced a colossal logistical problem that neither railroads nor standard aviation could solve: infrastructure. Vast territories of the USSR lacked roads or runways. Energy, standard aircraft and helicopters, consumed too much fuel to move cargo to inaccessible regions. Siberia, the Arctic, war. In the event of a conflict in Europe, NATO would immediately destroy all runways. The USSR needed a transport vehicle capable of delivering troops and equipment directly to the front line without using airfields. Helicopters were too slow and fuel-hungry. Airplanes required expensive, long runways. Shchukin proposed a third solution, inspired not by aviation, but by HYDRODYNAMICS. The key principle of the EKIP was the exploitation of the ground effect. This is a phenomenon where a wing flying very close to a surface, land or water, receives extra lift from an air cushion trapped beneath it. A typical aircraft only uses the ground effect during takeoff and landing. Shchukin proposed a machine that would utilize it constantly, but with a revolutionary change in shape. He abandoned traditional wings. The EKIP had a disc shape, or a lifting body, with a nearly flat bottom and unique, complex nozzles at the rear. This shape allowed it to take off and land vertically, like a helicopter, using jet thrust to create an air cushion, VVP, vertical takeoff and landing, transition to horizontal flight, using the same cushion, but now as an equinoplane at low altitude, up to 3 meters, with phenomenal fuel efficiency. Ascend to traditional cruising altitudes, up to 10 kilometers, like a regular plane, using the minimal drag profile of its disc body. Ultimately, the EKIP was intended to be the most versatile transport vehicle in the world, capable of carrying 120 tons of cargo thousands of kilometers while using 3 times less fuel than any existing analog. Despite its ecological name, the project immediately captured the attention of the highest Soviet military brass. The EKIP was quickly classified and placed under the wing of the Ministry of Aviation Industry. The military saw it as the perfect weapon. Invisibility. A low-flying craft in equinoplane mode would be invisible to most standard radars of the time, which struggled to detect targets near the ground. Stealth. The craft could take off and land anywhere, without requiring airfields, making it ideal for covert deployment of paratroopers or tactical weapons placement. Hypermobility. In the event of war, the EKIP could move an entire tank company behind enemy lines within hours. In the 1980s. The first large-scale prototype, the EKIP L-23, was built in Zhukovsky near Moscow. Western intelligence was obsessed with Soviet exotic projects at the time, such as the massive Caspian Sea monster equinoplanes. But the EKIP remained in the shadows, even to them. Random blurred photographs taken by spy satellites over closed test sites in the 1980s did not give a clear picture. What they saw was an object with a perfectly smooth, disc-like shape, lacking conventional wings or tails. It was these fragments of information, leaking through Western intelligence channels, that fueled rumors of a Russian UFO, an aircraft impossible to explain in terms of known aerodynamics. For analysts at the CIA, this was the most frightening scenario. The Soviets had achieved a technological breakthrough that the West had not even dreamed of. The EKIP prototype represented a miracle of Soviet engineering genius. Despite the scarce resources, the 9-ton craft was powered by 2 turbojet engines that provided not only horizontal thrust, but also the lift required for vertical takeoff. To ensure stability in flight, without wings or rudders. Shchukin utilized a system of automatic airflow control through special nozzles located across the entire body. The electronic brain of the aircraft had to constantly redistribute thrust, balancing the disc in 3-dimensional space. Controlling such a craft required a new generation of pilots. They had to master not only high-altitude flight, but also precision, maneuvering at an altitude of just a few meters in equinoplane mode, where the slightest gust of wind or pilot error could lead to catastrophe. It was like trying to balance a giant coin on water. You weren't flying. You were skimming on an air cushion, and every second was a fight for balance. Recollection reconstructed from interviews with project engineers. The project was steeped in paranoia. Every employee who worked on the project in Zhukovsky signed non-disclosure agreements that were essentially infinite in duration. They were forbidden not only from discussing the shape of the craft, but even from mentioning the existence of the experimental sector at the factory grounds. By the late 1980s, the EKIP project reached its peak. Successful radio-controlled model tests confirmed the aerodynamic principles. A large, piloted prototype was ready for full-scale testing. However, dramatic changes were beginning in the USSR. Perestroika was underway, bringing with it a financial crisis and a collapse of the military budget. The EKIP, like many other ambitious but incredibly expensive projects, found itself under threat of cancellation. Officials who once saw it as an instrument of victory in World War III now saw only a black hole in the budget. The decisive blow came in 1991. As the Soviet Union began to disintegrate, funding for the project was entirely cut. Lev Shchukin, refusing to concede defeat, tried to save the project. He rebranded it for civilian purposes: firefighting, crew transport to remote sites, and environmental monitoring. He even sought funding abroad, presenting the EKIP as the transport of the future. But it was too late. The main EKIP prototype was literally cut up on orders to make space in the factory. The dream of the flying disc was destroyed not by a design flaw, but by economic collapse and political chaos. The project was officially closed and classified, leaving behind only a few burned blueprints and rumors that would feed conspiracy theories for decades afterward. Today, The EKIP project remains one of the most vivid illustrations of the genius and madness of the Soviet era. When you see news headlines about unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, that demonstrate incredible maneuverability and lack visible wings, you must remember the concept of an aircraft capable of flying without wings was not Hollywood fiction. It was a reality that engineers like Lev Shchukin were attempting to realize behind the Iron Curtain. The EKIP is not just a closed page of history. It is a persistent, unsettling reminder of how much was developed under the strictest secrecy, which we still do not know about. Had the Soviet Union survived just 5 more years and managed to bring the EKIP to serial production, the world would have received a transport that would have changed logistics and possibly the very nature of warfare. And the skies over the U.S. and Europe could have been filled not with airplanes, but with silent, low-flying discs carrying nuclear payloads. The greatest mystery of the EKIP is not how it flew, but what would have happened if it had been allowed to fly. Ultimately, the most intriguing and frightening aspect of the Cold War is not what we found in the archives. It is what remains classified, hidden in the debris of a geopolitical catastrophe. And perhaps, somewhere in a deep, dusty hangar, another prototype is waiting, one that still looks like a visitor from another galaxy.